Now the seller is paying the seller's agent, the buyer is paying the buyer's agent. However, we still can negotiate because everything has been, always will be fully negotiable. So we can still negotiate and say, okay, so seller, you're going to pay your side of the compensation, the listing agents, but we might also want to offer compensation to the buyer side. We'll talk about why that is going to be a benefit to them or might be a benefit to them. But we want to make sure that we understand this and we understand how we're going to have this conversation. So you can do this in a number of ways. Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Build Your Business with Brittany. I'm Brittany, a real estate agent, coach, and investor. And every Thursday at 2 p.m., we gather to share tips, strategies, and insights to help you grow your business to the next level. Whether you're a brand new agent or a seasoned pro, there's something in these trainings for you. Now let's jump into this week's topic. Today we're talking about crafting contracts, and specifically we're talking about the RLA, the Residential Listing Agreement, and we're talking about how to win that listing. So there are lots of things for us to talk about with the RLA. I'm going to focus our talk today because we don't have tons and tons of time, but I'm going to focus us today on talking about what are some of the common questions I get, and then we're going to walk through the actual RLA and how to fill it out. Of course, we've had some changes, and so we want to make sure that you know how to fill everything out correctly, what it all means. So I want to give us some time to walk through that. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll be taking a look as we go, or you can wait until the end. We'll have a Q&A time then too. All right, so let's jump in. So a couple of common questions that I get, I wanted to go through at the beginning because I feel like we'll talk about it, and then once we actually go through, I'll mention this is where you put this in. This is where we write this down so that it's documented. This is where we make sure that we say this. So I want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of this. These are the common questions that we're going to go through. So number one, how will I get paid? Of course, this is the most common question for everybody because it's an important one. And this is the biggest thing right now to try and figure out with this NAR settlement and all this shakeup that's happening. We want to figure out how we're going to get paid. Now, on the listing side, it's a little bit easier because it's a little more clear cut because it didn't change very much. The way we get paid is the way we've always gotten paid. The conversations that we're having might be a little bit different. So for instance, in the past, we might say, okay, we're going to charge you, seller, X percent. Let's just say 6%. We're going to charge you 6%. And in general, about half of that was automatically going to the buyer side. So the seller's brokerage was paying the buyer's brokerage. Well, all of that has gone out the window, and now brokerages are not paying each other. Now the seller is paying the seller's agent, the buyer is paying the buyer's agent. However, we still can negotiate because everything has been, always will be fully negotiable. So we can still negotiate and say, okay, so seller, you're going to pay your side of the compensation, the listing agents, but we might also want to offer compensation to the buyer side. We'll talk about why that is going to be a benefit to them or might be a benefit to them, but we want to make sure that we understand this and we understand how we're going to have this conversation. So you can do this a number of ways. I know I have, and I've mentioned it to you before, but I have a menu of services where I say, okay, if you want these services, full service, it's going to be X, full service plus is going to be X plus whatever, full service plus is going to be X plus Z. So you can decide for yourself how you want to do that, what you want to do. If you wanted to do a menu of services, if you wanted to say this is what it is, if you want to negotiate, if you want to give options, it's totally up to you. But the idea is that now you are only charging for your side, and then the other side is different. Now, the beauty of this is that a lot of people are used to paying, let's call it 6% for a lot of sellers. They're used to paying 6% or whatever that percentage might be. And now we're coming and we're saying, hey, I'm going to charge you probably less than that, X percent, maybe 3%. And now instead of them hearing, oh, I'm paying 6%, they're hearing I'm paying 3%. That feels a lot better, even if, it all comes out in the wash, it's all going to be the same because they're probably going to end up paying the buyer side commission anyway, but it still feels different. Of course, anytime we're paying a different amount of money, a lower amount of money, we as consumers feel good about getting a deal. We feel good about getting what we pay for. So being able to say, okay, I'm going to charge you X percent and it's lower than what in their mind was going to be 6% or whatever that is, it's going to be a benefit for you. So the conversation is what's important when we talk about how are you going to get paid. The conversation here is what you really have to master. So when we think about the conversation behind getting paid, what you need to do is you really have to have a great understanding of what it is that you're going to provide. What services are you going to provide for the compensation that you're saying you are owed? So I have a lot of agents who say, well, what do I do? What is it that I do? You need to have a really good idea of what you do. And let me just tell you, when you create a listing presentation, that helps to outline a lot of the things that you do. And so we'll go through that actually in a couple of weeks. We're going to go through the listing presentation, but that really helps to kind of solidify in your mind what you do, but also to your clients. It shows them exactly step by step what you do, your strategy, how this is all going to work. And so the listing presentation, and for that matter, when you do a buyer's presentation, a lot of people aren't used to doing a buyer's presentation. I've done a buyer's presentation pretty much from the beginning, but a lot of people are not used to this. And so outlining it is where we're going to show our value. So it's super, super important that you have something that shows your value, that you have something that tells you what your value is and makes you feel confident in explaining it. So the answer of how will I get paid is really the same as you've always gotten paid. It's about the conversation, it's about a negotiation, it's about proving your value, and then we'll talk later about where you actually write it in the RLA. But when I'm doing a listing appointment, I'm going through my presentation. At the end, I do the menu of services so that my clients can choose what they pay. And then I write in the amount into the RLA. So I'm not bringing an RLA already filled out with the amount because it very much is a conversation that we're having. Again, that's for you to decide how you want to run your business, but just know there are options here. However you want to do it, you can choose how you do it and what works best for you. All right, here's another good one, especially with all of the NAR mix up. This is a confusing one. Can I show my listing? So if I'm a listing agent and I have a listing, can I show my listing to someone without signing a contract? So without signing the BRBC, the Buyer's Representation Agreement. Can I show my listing without signing that? The answer to that is yes. Anytime you're going to do something that is going to benefit your seller, you can do that without signing that agreement. But you have to make sure that that buyer understands that everything that you're doing and you're saying is for the benefit of your seller. You're representing your seller until and unless you have a separate signed agreement with the buyer. So if they come in and they're unrepresented, you can show them the property. But if they want to submit an offer, at that point, that's when you have to have the discussion and say, okay, are you wanting me to represent you? Are you wanting to come as an unrepresented buyer? That is highly discouraged. But, what is it that they're wanting to do? So can you show the property? Yes. Now, if you have somebody who wants to see a listing that's not yours, like if you're showing your listing and then that same person says, hey, there's a listing down the street and I want to see that one too, and that's not your listing, can you show that without a signed agreement? The answer is no. You cannot show another listing because that's not benefiting your seller. You are working for your seller. Now, if you want to show them another house and they agree to sign a representation agreement, then absolutely go and show them all the houses that you want. But you cannot show them a house without an agreement signed unless it's your own listing. Does that make sense? So of course you have your RLA signed, your listing agreement signed by your seller, and then they are your client. You are working for them. So everything you do is going to be to the benefit of your seller. Every conversation you have, everything. So if a buyer walks in unrepresented, that conversation is not going to necessarily help them. All the information that you gather is going to help your seller. Now, if they come and say, no, I want you to represent me, that's when we now say, okay, now we can have a different conversation. Now I can help you out a little bit more. Now I can talk to you about the comps. Now you can do a little bit of things because now you're putting your buyer representation hat on and you're still representing your seller, but you're now also representing a buyer. That's a confusing one. A lot of people have this question of, can I still show it without a signed contract? And the answer to that is yes. So what triggers the contract needing to be signed? Well, the things that trigger a contract needing to be signed for a buyer, let's take it on the buyer side because I'm just continuing this line of thought. So what triggers the contract needing to be signed is anytime you're doing basically any kind of research for them on the property, if you're showing them a property, including a virtual showing. So if you're taking your phone and doing FaceTime and walking around and saying, here's the kitchen and here's the garage and here's the living room and dining room. If you're doing that and you're showing it to them with the intention of them going to buy it, then you need to have a signed agreement. If they say, I really like this house, can you look up the comps around it? Then you need to have a signed agreement. What does not trigger a contract needing to be had is putting them on an MLS strip. If they say, hey, I really want to see more houses but I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger, great. You can put them on an MLS strip and you don't have to get an agreement signed. But as soon as they find a house that they like and they say, oh, I want to see this one, that's when you need to get an agreement signed. So before you walk in and show them a house, you have to have a signed agreement. And your agreement can be the BRBC, the Buyer Representation Agreement, or it can be the PBRS. Is that what it is? It's the Buyer Representation Agreement Light, where you're really just saying, okay, I'm just going to represent you for this 1 or 2 or 3 properties. So either one of those is a contract that needs to be signed. So what does not trigger a contract needing to be signed? When you go and do a walkthrough, like a property tour walkthrough, that is not something that needs to be signed because you're not doing that for a specific client. You're not doing specific research for them. You're not doing any of the things that it really spells out that has to be required, that's required for the contract. It's really just a marketing piece. And so you're allowed to do that without getting contracts signed. So there are some differences, and it's really important for you to know. You can find them on the NAR website, the CAR website. It has what triggers the contract, when does a contract need to be signed. It has all these FAQs for you, but that's an important one. If you still have questions, definitely check that out and look it up because you want to make sure that you're following the new rules for this. But the reality is the most important thing is you have to remember you need to have a contract signed when you're doing actual activities to show the property that can lead to them writing an offer. Oh, we're going out of order. How do I have the conversation with the seller about offering buyer agent compensation? So this is a big question that I get a lot from agents that I work with. How do I have this conversation? Because a lot of times if you lead with hey, I'm just going to charge you my percentage and we'll wait to see what happens with the buyer side, they're going to say, well, then I don't want to pay for the buyer side. How do I not pay for the buyer side? Well, the reality is it is a benefit to pay for the buyer side because you want to get as many eyeballs on your property as possible. And if that buyer is working with an agent, which we know about 60% of buyers are working with agents. So if 60% of the population are working with agents and those agents aren't getting offered any compensation and their clients are saying, well, don't show me anything that doesn't get any compensation offered because I can't afford it, I don't want to pay it, whatever, that automatically takes your listing out of the running. So what's better is to say, hey, let's offer the potential of offering this buyer agent compensation, and then we'll see what happens as the offers come in. Because the reality is, if you get 5 offers and 3 of them say that they're going to waive the buyer agent fee, great. Now you're talking about, we're looking at those 3 that are waiving the buyer agent fee. But if you get 2 offers in and neither one of them are waiving that fee, then why would you do that? Or if you get 1 offer in and it's not waiving the fee, you don't want to go back to them and risk losing that offer and say, oh, by the way, we don't want to pay the buyer agent fee. So what I tell my clients is we're going to look at the net amount that you're going to profit and put in your pocket. We're going to look at the net amount for every single offer that comes in, because it really depends. If somebody, I just had this, I had a listing where we got an offer that came in and they were offering $10,000 over the asking price, but they were asking for a $5,000 credit. That's fine. It's normal. But the reality is they're really only offering $5,000 over the asking price. Again, it totally depends on the other offers coming in. So the same conversation I'm having with my sellers is it depends on the offers that come in. That's the same conversation that I have when agents call and say, are your sellers willing to pay the buyer agent compensation? I say, yes, they're willing to, but it depends on the offers that come in. So please submit whatever your request is. So remember, it's all about those conversations. The conversations are super, super, super important to get very comfortable with, because the reality is, in this day and age, with this agent compensation, when you're on the listing side, it's all about the offers that come in. It's all about what are the offers that are going to come in and what is the net amount that my clients are going to get. Because I always use this example. If you have $1 million listing and somebody comes in and says, okay, well, we'll pay you $1,015,000, but we want you to pay the buyer agent fee. Well, that's $25,000, $30,000. So really their offer is much lower. But if somebody else comes in and says, we'll pay you full price, but we'll pay that buyer agent fee, well, now you're looking at a net gain of about $25,000, $30,000. So it's always so important to look at every single offer individually as they come in. But these are the conversations we have with our clients. It all depends on the offers that come in as they come in. But you definitely do want to have the conversation that it's a benefit to offer that buyer agent fee, to at least consider offering it. What I always do is I bring a net sheet to my listing presentation. And I say, okay, I always put in at least a 2.5% fee to the buyer side so that they can see that and they can see, okay, we're still profiting a good amount. So I bring a couple of different options because most of the time I don't know what the condition is like. I don't know about this house. So I bring a couple different options on if we need to list it low, if we can list it a little bit higher, but I always put in that buyer agent compensation because $25,000, $30,000 is a big shock if I haven't already prepped them for that. All right, we're still going out of order. How do I win the listing over a more seasoned agent? This is a great question, and it is entirely possible. How do you win the listing over a more seasoned agent? First of all, just because an agent is seasoned does not mean they're better. I worked with an agent. I will not name names. I worked with an agent on the other side of a transaction who, we'll just say, was not very good. And every single time we had a disagreement, we had a confusion, every single time something happened, she would tell me, I've been licensed for 32 years. And I was like, have you been practicing real estate for 32 years? Because I cannot imagine. Everything she was doing, she was messing up on. It was a disaster. And it was all on her. And so for her, she lost her clients easily tens of thousands of dollars because of mistakes that she made. And so seasoned agents, the length of them being in the business does not automatically equate to knowledge, wisdom, understanding, success, any of that. So we need to make sure that we don't feel the pressure of that as agents. Just because we're up against a more seasoned agent does not mean that they are better. But what you really need to do is you really need to figure out what is your unfair advantage. We talk about this all the time, so hopefully you've thought about this. What is your unfair advantage? How do you win over somebody else? Is it that you know those contracts front ways and back ways, you are not going to make a mistake? Is it that you're super detail oriented? Is it that you are able to help them strategize? Is it that you're able to help them with making a really good financial investment? Is it that you have excellent customer service and you are not going to skip a beat? Is it that you are fun and friendly and, able to really connect with them and help them through the process? Is it that you are a superb negotiator and you're going to save them tens of thousands of dollars because of your negotiation skills? What is it about you that is going to make you stand out? Anything that you can find that will make you stand out is going to be how you win these listings. We talk about this here and there, but 80% of the sellers who hire a real estate agent hire the first one that they meet, and most of them only look at one agent. So most of the time you're not going up against, 3, 4, 5 agents. Most of the time you're going up against one, maybe two, and most of the time it's actually going to be you're not going up against any. But you also have to remember there are a lot of really bad agents out there. So don't you worry. I just did a listing presentation with somebody who had a week to prepare, and they said she really did not seem like she was prepared at all. And because I had a listing presentation, because I knew the comps in the area, because really it was the basics, because I knew how to do my job, I got the listing and they were very happy and they were very comfortable and confident in me and what I brought to the table. So you don't have to do a lot to win the trust of your sellers, because there are so many agents who are so bad out there. Sometimes it's even better to go up against another agent because a lot of agents are really bad. All right, now we're hitting number 4. Do I need to be sure another agent has a written agreement with their client before showing them my listing? So now we're going back to this NAR settlement stuff and really just figuring out what are the specifics. So we have my listing, a listing that is mine. I have an RLA signed with my seller, and I have a buyer who's coming with an agent, and the agent says, yeah, I have it signed. Do I need to check on that? The answer is no. You don't need to be the BRBC police. You don't need to be the person who is going and making sure that everybody has a signed agreement. Let your board handle that. Let NAR deal with that. You don't need to do that. You are trusting that if they say, yes, we have an agreement signed, that you have it. Once you get into escrow, you're going to have proof of all of this stuff when it comes to actually having your, like if your seller is paying for the buyer side compensation, there might have to be proof of that or whatever. Don't worry about it in the beginning. You don't have to worry. If they're saying that they have a written agreement, if they're saying this is their client, we just take them at face value. Now, before we move on, I want to just put a disclaimer out there. I've gone to lots of trainings. I've read a lot about this. I look on the websites. I do a lot of this coming from the horse's mouth. However, I am not a trainer. I am not somebody who is doing this as a living. I don't get paid for this. So I want to make sure that you do your own due diligence. And especially if you're outside of my area, make sure that you're following the rules of your local board, of your local MLS, of your local brokerage, because different brokerages have different things that they want you to follow. And so make sure that if you ever hear anything different in that way than what I say, go with what your board and your brokerage says. Don't say, well, Brittany out in Ventura County said this, because that does not matter. Okay, before we jump to the next topic, I want to remind you that if you're looking for even more real estate resources like a social media content calendar or an open house roadmap, visit the link in the description below because I have just that for you. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you get more videos just like this as soon as they come out. Now let's keep going with today's training. As we move forward, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. We want to make sure we are opting into that growth because the change is here. It has been here for almost 6 months. And guess what? Change is coming again because every December they change the forms and they will be changing the forms again this December. So don't you worry. I will be here talking about all the forms changes. I will be talking about everything that you need to know. So stay with me, but just know change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Let's grab onto it and move forward. Growth is what's optional. All right, so now let's jump into our RLA, the Residential Listing Agreement. Okay, so I'm here in my zip forms and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit if I can. Okay, so just like we always have in all of our forms, this comes as a bundle. So you'll see that the very first document that we have is not the RLA. It's actually this AD, the agency relationship. Okay, this bar popped up and I can't see now, but it's the agency relationship form. So we're gonna go through. You can see this is totally blank. One of the things that I tell you always is before you do any of this, go to your zip forms and go up to the top where it says templates and create a template, because then once you create a template, all of this stuff is done for you. So I would recommend that as we do this right now today, you go through and put this in as your templates. So I'm going to go through and we're going to check this box for seller and we're going to put in seller Susie and we're going to check this box for seller and we're going to put in seller Sam. Okay. Now, remember, every time after this, any place that has seller 1 or seller 2, this is already going to be put in. So we don't need to put these in again. Now we're going to start and filling out this part of it. So it's our real estate broker firm, which is the list agent brokerage. Then the DRE license number of your brokerage DRE. Oops, what happened? Brokerage DRE. Then down here, this is where you put the agent. So this is your information. Agent, oops. Okay. Agent name, and then agent DRE right here, and then the date. So you'll notice that the date here, I can't click on, I can't change, I can't do anything with the date here. And that's because when you go to have them fill out signatures, this is going to be it's going to be connected to when they sign. So you're not putting in the date here. We'll put in the date a little bit later. So as we scroll down, now we get to the RLA. Now we get to the residential listing agreement. So what you'll notice is that it's a little bit different, and now it's like a grid. So just like all of our other forms, this is a grid. Makes it super, super easy, and it's actually really convenient to just print out a couple of these pages to take to your listing agreement, walk through them, explain to them, write in all of these things, have your seller, just do their initial and then say, I'm going to fill this out on DocuSign and send it to you via DocuSign so that you get this whole form. But you're walking through just a quick part of it. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want. This is what I do. I just bring the grid, so 2 or 3 pages maybe, and then I walk through that so that they know what they're signing. But I tell them later on, I'm going to send this to you through DocuSign. I know some agents who bring the entire document with them, and it's a lot of pages. So you can do what you want, but that's the way I do it. Okay, so now let's go back to the top. This date prepared, this is where you're going to fill in a date. And you're going to put the date that it was prepared. So if you're going to have your listing presentation on Saturday, then I would put that's Saturday. That's when you're preparing this, because you're preparing this on that date that you meet with them. But if you already met with them and they're going to sign it today, then you want to put today's date. So the date prepared is different from the date signed, or it can be different from the date signed, because the date prepared is where you're going to refer back to. So anytime you have an addendum or a secondary document, it's going to say this document is in reference to the RLA dated this date. It's this date prepared. So you can see Seller Susie and Seller Sam are already in here, so we don't have to write this in again. So this is talking about the property description. So we put property address. We're going to put situated in the city, property city. Oops. Property city. Then the county. There. It's in California because this is a California form. And then we're just going to put the zip code. Now the assessor parcel number, this is the number that is associated with the land, with the property. And you're going to find this either on title, on tax records. It's pretty easy to look up. So we're just going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4. It's usually a 9-digit number. So we're going to put that in. Now is when we move on to the grid. So remember, we have all of these paragraph numbers, and all of these numbers have an explanation over here. So the explanation of the listing period is in paragraph 4G. So if we go down to 4G, this is where we're talking about 4G. This is where we're talking about the listing agreement information. And you can see that a lot of these are connected with paragraph numbers down below. So this is helpful if you have any questions about this. You want to be sure to take a look down below. If your client has any questions, you want to refer them to take a look down below. So the listing period, we're going to say it's going to begin on this date. Make sure that you take a note of this. It is not to exceed 24 months. This is not if it is 4 units. Let's just read. If improved with 1 to 4 units and not owned by an entity. If listing period exceeds 24 months on a residential 1 through 4, this agreement is void unless seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. So if the seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership, then you can extend it longer. But if not, then if it's just a normal seller of 1 to 4 units, then it cannot exceed 24 months. So we're starting on today's date, ending on, I always like to give it a year. So I'm going to do the last day of the month in 2025. I always do the last day of the month because remember, we're thinking of scaling. So if I have all of these agreements that end or expire on different dates, that's going to be really hard. But if I know every month at the end of the month, I have things expire at the end of the month, I need to make sure to be on it before the end of the month. Okay. So also, side note, I always put the listing date. The listing period begins when I show them the property. Not when I show them. When I go to the property to do my presentation, when they agree to say, yes, we want to work with you. So even if they need a month to do repairs, even if they need 2 weeks to really fix things up, I'm still going to say that this listing period begins now because I don't want to do any work with them or help them on this property without having a signed agreement. Because they can pull out at any time and they can say, oh, never mind, I'm going to do something else with somebody else, even though you've already helped me with so much stuff. Now, keep in mind, they still can do that, but having a signed agreement makes it a little bit more difficult. So I want to make sure I have a signed agreement. Down below in the MLS document, it's going to have where it shows, and I'll point it out, it's going to say, where this property is not going to go live until a certain date. And that is where we're actually going to fill that out. So just keep that in mind. I always do the listing agreement is not when it goes live, but I do it for the date that I'm talking with them. The listing price is whatever you agree upon. Let's just call it $1 million. Remember, there's the, what is that? Well, oh, we have some writing on here. Wow. I did not know that could happen. Okay, so now we're doing property specifics. This is if it's something a little bit different, like a manufactured home or probate. That's when you're going to fill this. That's when you're going to fill out a different form. It's just going to be an addendum. But for a regular property, we're just going to leave that blank. All right, compensation to seller's broker. So remember, this is only the seller side of the transaction. So this is where, remember I told you, we already have the conversation about here's what you're going to pay me. Here's all that I do for you. And for that, I charge X. So let's just say X is 3%. You can choose whatever you want. 3% of the listing price. And if any, this would be like, for instance, my office charges an admin fee, things like that per transaction. You can say that's just cost of doing business, or you can pass it along to your clients. If that's the case, you can put it in here and just leave it at that. Here is where you would say, if, for instance, you're doing a flat rate. So sometimes with like a much lower priced property, like a mobile home, a lot of agents do just a flat fee. So that's what that would be. Or if you had a compensation schedule, that would be like if you said, okay, well, if I sell your house in 3 days, I'm going to charge this. If I sell it in 12 days, I'm going to charge this. If I double end the deal, like all of that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I pretty much leave it like pretty clean. So I don't attach a compensation schedule. But if you had one, this is where it would be. All right. Question in the chat. If the listing date changes later, do you do an addendum to change the list date? Yes. There is, and I said who did the drawing. No problem. I didn't even know it could do that. Learned something new. There is an addendum. It's called it's called something about changing the listing, something like that. I'm drawing a blank. It's some kind of addendum that, yes, if you want to change anything about this, you would do an addendum. So if you wanted to change the list date, if they wanted to list in 2 months and you ran comps again and you're like, ooh, now the list price is going to be different, then you would do that addendum as well. and I'm sure the name will come to me of this form, but it's basically like a change in listing, something like that. All right. Additional buyer compensation to seller's broker if the buyer is unrepresented. So this is if the buyer is not represented. This does not apply to dual agency. So if it's dual agency, then basically like you're able to represent the buyer, but you're negotiating the fee just like you would do if it was another agent coming and trying to represent their buyer for the property. This is if a buyer is coming totally unrepresented and they're saying, hey, I want you to represent me and I want to try and get a better deal. Now, here's the thing. I don't like this at all because I don't think that an unrepresented buyer is going to get a fair deal. I don't think that it is wise for somebody to not be represented in the sale of a house. However, if you wanted to do this, this is where you would put it in and you can charge whatever you want. Some people charge less. I say you're still going to have now double the liability, double the work, all of that kind of stuff. So I would just put the same amount that you're doing above, but it's totally up to you, totally negotiable. You don't have to do it. Just keep in mind that it does not apply to dual agency. So it says here, if broker represents both buyer and seller, buyer side compensation shall be specified in a separate written agreement. So that's what you would do if it was dual agency. This is not talking about dual agency. All right, continuation of right to compensation for broker identified prospective buyers. So the continuation period shall be blank number of calendar days after the listing period or any extension or continuation period. So usually I put that in for about 30 days. This is basically once the listing has expired or if somebody cancels it for one reason or another, you are able to provide a list saying, hey, I helped these buyers. And if these buyers come and they want to buy this property, then I should still be able to get paid for that. So that's what this continuation period is. This is if the seller has worked with other brokers and they have an obligation. So for instance, if it's something like this, where they were working with another buyer, with another agent, and the agent says, hey, we can cancel the deal, but if any of these people come, I should get paid for that. That's where this would be listed out. All right, so items intended to be included and excluded. Now, keep in mind that for the listing agreement, this really is just for your information. This is to make sure that you're on the same page. So you don't have to list every little thing, but if there are some specifics, like I'll give you an example. The last, in this one listing that I have right now, they have a water softener that is included, that's included in the sale of the home. They're also including all appliances. So, oops, spelled wrong. Okay, there we go. They're also including all appliances. So I'm writing this down not to hold them to it, but just to make sure we're on the same page. So if I go to list it in a month and I'm like, ooh, what did they say they were including again? Did they say they wanted to keep that, didn't want to keep it? I can go back to this and say, oh yeah, that's right. But if they end up saying, oh no, never mind, we don't want to sell the refrigerator, they're not bound to it by signing this. That's not what this is. So you just want to make sure that you understand that and they understand that. This is just so that you are writing some stuff down. Like if they have excluded items is important to list if there are things that are normally included with the sale of a house, but they want to keep it. So sometimes that's going to be a refrigerator. Maybe a lot of times it's like a chandelier or something like that they just really want to keep, or their Ring video camera, things like that. A lot of times what I tell people is if you want to exclude them, but there are things that would normally be included, you may want to remove them first. So for instance, my client had a tree that was planted into the ground. And she was like, it's just special to me, holds sentimental value. Should I leave it? Can I take it? And I said, if you want to take it, go ahead and pull it up and put it into a pot, because usually potted plants are not included. So you just want to do some things like that just so that they understand that like these would normally be included, but we want to make sure that the buyers know that it's not included from the get-go. So same thing about this, leased items, liened items. A lot of times a solar system, like solar power, is leased or liened. And so you want to make sure that you know that, because if it is, then you want to make sure that you're starting the process or asking them to start the process of what does the transfer look like. Because sometimes, especially solar is a good example of this, sometimes they don't allow you to just transfer it into the name of somebody else. Sometimes you have to pay it off completely. My mom had that situation. She had solar and it was a lien, and they weren't able to transfer the lien. They had to pay it off in the sale of the house. So that was, like $16,000 that they had to account for. So you just want to start having that conversation up in the beginning. So that's why these things are here. Again, it's not something that they have to know or have to tell you. It's just the conversation starter. Smart home features are down here. Property will be listed in the following MLS. The primary is whatever your primary MLS is. Mine is CRMLS. If there are others that it will be listed in. So for instance, we have a little town near us, Ojai, that has its own MLS. But if we say it's going to be listed in the Ojai MLS, but also in CRMLS, that's where we would list this. This is seller instructs broker not to use or take photographs in marketing. Obviously we don't want to do that. So we just tell them like, that's only if they, for whatever reason, are not allowing that. We don't want to do that. Timing of offers. The default is that the seller instructs broker to present all offers as soon as practicable. Practicable. That is that word. Okay. So this is, you may want to say, we're going to get tons of offers, so I'm not going to present them as soon as they come in. I'm going to present them on the Monday after we go live, or, whatever you wanted to do. You could write in that date, or however many days after it's listed on the MLS. So again, you're not held to this. You're not held to this. It's just so that you're on the same page. But sometimes, like in a probate or some other times like that, the courts require a property to be listed for at least 7 days, for instance. And so you want to make sure that you're doing that everybody knows that we're not even going to look at offers for 7 days, because otherwise you have to present as soon as they all come in. Buyer supplemental offer letters. These are sometimes called love letters, buyer letters. In California, we do not do these anymore. This is not something that is common practice. It has been stopped. The reason for this is because we're trying to protect our sellers from any kind of discrimination, even accidental discrimination. If they see a buyer letter that shows a sweet, happy family, and then they see another buyer's letter that shows somebody in a wheelchair, and they choose somebody not in a wheelchair, not for any discrimination reasons, but just because that's what they decided on, that person could come back and say, this was a violation of fair housing. This was discrimination. And so we want to say, nope, we don't show any buyer letters. So the default is we are not presenting them. And then if the seller says, no, I want to see them, we're going to check this off, but it's saying the seller is acting against the broker's advice. Investigation report. So this natural hazard disclosure is automatically checked off. That's going to be ordered as soon as escrow's opened. But any of this other stuff, most of the time it happens through escrow. However, sometimes we want to do a home inspection before. Like for instance, my house that I was selling, I wanted to make sure that I did a home inspection so that the buyers knew exactly what they were getting, so that I knew exactly what I was getting. So, because I didn't want any surprises. I wanted to make sure I got clean offers, and that was what it was. And so if I wanted to do a general property inspection, I might tell them, hey, we're going to do that beforehand. And then that would be on the sellers to pay. And it's saying seller shall order and pay for any properties or reports within 5 days of this agreement. So this is totally up to you. You can determine if you want to do this. A lot of people don't, but in some areas, it's very common that you do have a property inspection, and in other areas, it's not at all. So you just want to make sure that you know what is common in your area. All right, check in the chat. Let's see. Didn't know anybody knew it was possible. So you have to check NHD and F3. Yeah, it's automatically checked, so you just can't uncheck it. So like I'm clicking on it right now, you can't uncheck it. So yes, it's automatically checked. All of the rest of these you can check and uncheck. This one you have to leave on there. Acceptation. I cannot talk today. Exceptions to ownership and title. This would be if they know that like their mom had co-signed on the property and their mom is on title. Again, not a big deal. It's just good to know this is what it is. This is kind of, I always talk about these are conversation starters. Seller intends to include a contingency to purchase replacement property as part of the transaction. This is what you would click if your seller is saying, I cannot sell this place if I don't buy the next place. So you need to make sure that you have this checked and the other form, the SPRP, which is a seller property replacement, something like that. It's a replacement property form. So you want to make sure that you know this, because sometimes your buyer is selling, but they don't have to sell to be able to buy the next property, or they don't have to buy the next property in order to sell. They have some place to go. They're good. They don't have to worry about what comes next. So you just want to make sure you understand exactly what it is that your seller is going to be doing. Seller opts out to key safe, locks, box, and signs. This is if your seller is like, I want this to be totally private, I don't want any of this stuff up, that's when you would put that. Now, some of the ways that I do things, like I don't do a sign until later on in the transaction. And the reason for that, it's strategic, but the reason for that is that I want it to be exclusive. I want it to feel really exciting, but also our sellers like when they like that additional privacy. And so they like not having a sign up. But even though I don't put up a sign, I don't check this box off because I want the option to put up a sign. So unless they tell me, no, I do not want a sign or a lockbox or anything like that, then I'm going to leave these blank. Additional terms for whatever kind of additional terms you would want to write in. And then these are automatically checked off. So you want to just leave those as is. And then we come to the end of our grid. So now the rest of this is just explanation for above. So you want to make sure that you read that and understand it. If your seller is an entity seller, LLC, corporation, trust, etc., you would check that off and fill out the rest of that. Most of the time, you're just dealing with regular people, but a lot of times you can see that you have, like, your sellers have their property in a trust. And so you would want to put that as the entity buyers, but they can still sign as them. I like to have my clients fill this out just because I then send this to my TC, and then she has all of this information, and it's not coming from me. So I'm not accidentally, putting in the wrong email address or wrong phone number. So my TC has all of this. So I like to have them fill all of this out. And then agent brokerage, remember we already have this filled out, but you want to make sure that the rest of this is filled out in your templates so that you're not having to do it every single time. Let's see, what is this in here as? Agent brokerage address, and then the city, state, and zip. And then if there is, this is the brokerage, and then you have the agent name. And you want to make sure you have your agent email address. And your DRE is already in there, and then your telephone number. Okay. And then if there is a secondary broker on here or agent, you can fill that out, and you would be filling out more than one agent from the same firm represents them, or two brokers with different companies are co-listing, and then you fill out the different forms. So here in this multiple listing service addendum, this is where we are wanting to make sure that we list the information that I mentioned before. Well, let's just go through it. So remember when I told you these are terms and conditions that are incorporated and made as a part of the residential listing agreement, dated, and it's the date of the agreement. So it's not the date they sign. That could be different. We always have to refer back to the date of the agreement. So that's what that is. And it's automatically on here. Okay, so here's what I was telling you. Seller instructs broker to begin marketing the property to the public on, and it's a different date from today. So remember, when you get your listing agreement, you have, I think it's 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours to put it into the MLS. Well, I don't want to do that because I always want to make sure I'm taking professional photos and doing all kinds of stuff. But remember, I want that listing agreement signed right away. So I'm always going to fill this part out, and I'm going to say, okay, well, if we need, let's say we need 3 weeks to get it done, we're not going to market the property to the public until that date. Now, we used to require this SELM, the SELM form, for this if we said we're not going to market it until later. But from what I'm hearing, you don't need that anymore for this. This is if we're saying we're not marketing it to the public, and we are specifically like not doing it. It's basically going to be registered through the MLS, et cetera, et cetera. My understanding is that you don't need that separate form if you're just waiting on it. You just have to fill this out. All this clear cooperation, all of this kind of stuff, you just leave blank unless you want to check off these specific instances. But you'll see all of these things that you would be checking off are very not common. So it's just read and sign, seller advisory, broker compensation, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, fair housing, consumer privacy, and we're done. So now we have gotten to the end of that. And I want to open it up for Q&A. Any questions on that? Let me pull up. Can we do coming soon? So coming soon is a little bit different. Coming soon is actually through the MLS. So you can do coming soon, and it's the date. Basically, coming soon is not technically active, but you are marketing it through the MLS. So that date that you're filling out and saying it's not going into the MLS until whatever that date is, that's when you would do the coming soon. But remember, with coming soon, you cannot do any showings. That's all the clear cooperation stuff. So you have to be careful with coming soon because you can't do any showings at all, even for people in your brokerage. So before you list it, once you have a signed agreement until it goes live, you can market it to people in your brokerage and to clients that you have a signed agreement with. You cannot market it publicly in any way. That includes putting a sign out, doing a property tour, posting pictures of it online. You can't do anything like that until 24 hours before it's going to go live. So once it goes live, you can either list it as coming soon or active, but then if you do it as coming soon, you cannot do any showings for anybody, including people in your office. What you can do is you can market it. So you can do like the marketing, you can push it on social media, you can do all that, but nobody can do any showings. What I prefer to do is I list it as active, but I only have, I only do private showings until a couple days, like until the following weekend. So it still is sort of like a coming soon. It has the feeling of a coming soon, but it's technically listed as active. You can do pictures for coming soon. So you can market it. You just can't do any showings. So coming soon is a tough one. But that's with the clear cooperation stuff. And to be honest, I have no idea if that's a California only thing, if it's for like lots of different people. I don't know. But that's the rule for California. Any other questions? All right, well, let me share my screen one more time. And so next week, we're talking about holiday lead gen, boost your business during the festive season. So there's lots and lots of ways that you can boost your business, that we can do things around the holidays, whatever holiday you choose. So make sure that you join us next week, Thursday at 2 p.m. I will be here on Zoom and hopefully live in person in the Oxnard Market Center. Don't forget, we're here every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Join me live by registering at the link in the description below and get your questions answered in real time. I love helping you succeed. Thanks for joining me for another Build Your Business with Brittany. Let's keep building, growing, and closing those deals. I'll see you next Thursday at 2 p.m.